Anyway, I think given the fact that we were sort of on Russian territory, we'll stay there. I think that's what my note was. It was a mental one. So we'll come to Patrick and talk about what he's been up to, and then we'll come to Ben as well and have a few laughs before we open up with some broader questions. Okay.
I think he laughs quickly, don't you?
Yes. All right. Okay. Yes. Well, I'll do a laughter-free thing. Though I have to say that one of my principal characters did ring me after I put the series out, which is a series called Russian Godfathers, about the oligarchs. Rang me at 3 a.m. and said, "Patrick, you have got me right." And I said, "Oh, how?" And he said, "I am arsehole, and you have showed it." So I thought, oh well, fine, that's an achievement. Anyway, so. I was about to say, actually, I was about to disagree with some of the people who've gone before me. Terrible shot. Because I think as a documentary maker that, sure, there's fiction on one side, but much more interestingly, for us, there are stories from the news media on the other. And the news media, I have to say, are the thing that concern me most and are my greater point of reference. And because they too create an interesting kind of fiction. And that was my starting point in being interested in the oligarchs, joking aside about the National Trust, in that when I first looked at it, in essence, if you were interested in oligarch, you were interested in Roman Abramovich, and that was it. And all you wanted to know about was, football, Chelsea, wealth, and that was pretty much it. And actually, it seemed to me there was a greater, far, far greater and more important story happening in Russia, which, and I'll go on to the reason that I think particularly the Western media missed it, or weren't interested in it. And actually, if one looked, there was a massively important tussle between the elected and the unelected, and for some bizarre reason, our news cameras couldn't give, to use a vernacular phrase, a toss about it. So I thought, well, let's go and have a look at that. And that seemed to me to, if documentary is not about pursuing a social agenda, I would say it is about pursuing a greater reality agenda, and one that lies behind quite a lot of either fiction or indeed the news media's functions. And that's what we should be about, if not constructing a reality. I would say it's deconstructing a reality, and that's what we all set out to do, God alone knows whether we succeeded. And at the time, there was President Putin on the one side, and there was an array of extremely wealthy forces on the other. Our particular subjects were Boris Berezovsky, who was by that stage in exile here, Mikhail Khodorkovsky, who was by that stage just jailed in Russia, and Luzhkov, the mayor of Moscow. And in essence, if you sort of broke it down crudely, there was the man who put Putin on the throne, who now wanted his throne back. There was the man who at one stage mooted, did or didn't want to control the economy, and Putin at that stage certainly wanted a lot of chunks of the economy back from him. And there was then the only politician who possibly would have the popular base to challenge Putin. And, and again, he himself not free of the, Luzhkov not exactly free of the taint of corruption. So our film followed that process through for the next, I think, 2 years, and slowly, one by one, they all crumbled before Putin's advance. Berezovsky, even though he part-funded the Ukrainian Revolution, which we bizarrely were involved in filming that process, it was an interesting period. I have to say, as a documentarist, in terms of finding out a truth, Boris, who was always very ready to be filmed, suddenly strangely became very ill. And I kept thinking, what the hell is going on? And eventually somebody said, yes, he seems to be having a lot of visitors from Kiev. And so I rang him up. And he said, Patrick, I'm so sorry, I have flu. And I said, all right, would that be Ukrainian flu? And he said, oh, you are so witty. You can come and have an interview tomorrow. And so we turned up, and sure enough, I think it was one of the bag carriers for Timoshenko was disappearing down the corridor at exactly the moment that the editor of Novaya Gazeta was coming up the corridor to discuss exactly what was going on in Kiev. Likewise, Khodorkovsky, there was this absurd game played with us, because they were attempting at that stage to portray Khodorkovsky as a sort of Nelson Mandela of Russia. And enormous efforts, vast amounts of Western PR firms were sort of brought down on our head. And indeed, I well remember filming his mother reciting poetry in the garden of the estate and thinking, what exactly is going on here? Anyway, as everyone knows, that fight ended in favour of the elected government, not in favour of him, and he still languishes to this day in jail. The rights and wrongs of that are not for this, were not as it were, my process to judge upon, but to document. And last but not least, Luzhkov, who just at the moment that he was about to make a run, he was sort of talking to me about, well, maybe I should be the president, maybe I have a duty to do so. Very cunningly, Kremlin put a sort of stalking horse in his way, who is known to us all, Lebedev, who I'm sure you all know, who sort of suddenly started these vicious attacks on Luzhkov's wife, again in the news media. And then, at a crucial moment, the Kremlin did a deal with Luzhkov and disowned Lebedev. And again, this was trumpeted through the press. And we were on the inside of both processes. Again, remember, filming Lebedev at exactly the moment he took the call from the Kremlin saying, OK, we're not supporting you anymore, it's over. And he put the phone down and said, it's one of those moments where you decide what you do in life. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I think I'm not enjoying politics anymore. And walked off. And I think that, by pure chance, I have to say, because we were actually out there to film his glorious housing development outside Moscow, by pure chance, I think we got a bit, by perchance / persistence / being around for longer than a news media ever can be, we got at a greater truth that there was a bigger battle going on. And spooling forward to Georgia, exactly the same cases, to read the media, you just think, on the one hand, it's either plucky Georgia versus bad Russia, or alternatively, it's, corrupt Georgia versus strong Russia. And actually, guess what? This is a row that has been rumbling on for 10 years. And again, it has to be said that my old friend, Mr. Berezovsky, is or was, till relatively recently, intimately involved in. It is no great surprise that when you look at what the first thing that Russia applied sanctions against in this row, it was mineral water, which was co-owned by Ms. Borzhomi, which is co-owned by Berezovsky and his one-time business manager, Badri Patakashvili. And at that stage, Patakashvili controlled large chunks of the Georgian economy, and Putin was endlessly furious about exactly that. And again, had we been making a documentary around that process, I have to say I would have started with the mineral water. And lo, of course, you move on and it becomes about much bigger things, oil, NATO, etc. But hey, the mineral water had something to do with it right at the start. So there you are. I would humbly say that sure, fiction is a concern, but it's actually the fictions created by non-fictional people that one should be interested in as a documentary maker. And that's all I have to say. Now, some jokes.